examining FanDuel Cafe value for Week 9. I'm Jason Gilba, JGilba11, taking a look at what our optimizer says is the best cafe value for each position this week on FanDuel. It's Thursday evening for me, so obviously going through, there's going to be some injury situations that still have to play out, which we will definitely go through and touch on as we kind of go through here. So looking at quarterback, Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, no real surprise for me here. I think Andrew Luck at 8K is certainly reasonable. You look at what he's done this season. Obviously, the only game where he had tremendous struggles was against Denver, as expected on the road. Even in a bad week last week, I mean, Kansas City got to him quite a bit. Obviously, forced him to have some turnovers, but still put up 19 FanDuel points. So, even against defenses that have gotten to him, he's been able to kind of go through and meet value most of the time. So I like Luck this week. I like that there's an 1,100 difference through Rodgers, as obviously, one of the big factors there of why he's slightly edged out despite the lesser projection. And you look over, the last few weeks or so, Luck has been very solid. Green Bay ranked 16th against the pass. Per Football Outsiders, they do have a banged up secondary. And on the other side, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is pretty obvious this week. I think with all the value that's going to be opening up in terms of running back and wide receiver as we go through here, you can plug in Aaron Rodgers and feel pretty good about it. So 31% DVOA against the pass for Indy, bottom 5 in FanDuel points allowed. So I think you're looking really as Aaron Rodgers is one of the top plays of the week here, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, you look at a 30 total with 89% of the passes, or 89% of the touchdowns scored for Green Bay has been through the air. He's just one of the safest options on the board, and obviously 9,100 cafe value still believes that he'll be paying that off handsomely. So next one here, Dak Prescott, safe option against the Browns for me. They rank 30th against the pass. Prescott's been above 17 FanDuel points in every week since week 1. Des Bryant back. I love Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, he's a top play. I think there's going to be enough to go around. I think Prescott meets value. Cleveland's been horrendous against opposing quarterbacks in terms of FanDuel points allowed, so you can feel pretty good about that, hitting value there. So running back next. So this is where we kind of dive into some injury situations. Charcandrick West would be obviously a fill-in option for Spencer Ware, who has yet to practice dealing with the concussion issue. It looks more and more likely that he's not going to play. Jags are allowing 21.5 FanDuel points per game to running backs this year with a 4.1 yards per carry. So pretty pedestrian. Obviously, West is going to be a volume guy this week. Total hasn't really come down too much with the news of the injuries, so there is belief that these guys are still going to be carrying quite the bit of value for scoring these points this week. I think West is a guy who's going to get a heavy dose of touches in terms of whether it's the pass or the run game. He'll really equal out. And if everything kind of goes as planned with game flow, West is going to be a solid back at 5,600 this week. Carlos Hyde, I mean, at the beginning of the week, it seemed like he was a little bit more optimistic to play. Chip Kelly, now not so sure. He's not so sure. It seems about 50-50. Obviously, a great matchup against the Saints for whoever starts, but the problem is, I mean, you look last week, DeJuan Harris did lead the backs in touches, but it wasn't by a significant amount. You really got to hope Hyde improves here throughout the week. I like him quite a bit. Really is a GPP play at 7K because of just the terrific matchup that the Saints present. But it's also an easy swerve because you have Devontae Booker, who's the same price tag. Yes, banged up as well, but he is going to play this week. Looking at an Oakland defense that allows 4.8 yards per carry to opposing backs this season. They have not been good in terms of fantasy points allowed. They've been very kind of beat up on the ground. So I like Booker. I think he's a cash game play as well. That game's looking to be fairly close. You expect Booker to kind of throw the ball, to be running the ball quite a bit. I don't think Denver's passing game is really thriving right now. So, Booker's another guy, even in the passing game, is going to get a couple dump offs, which adds to his floor as well. Really a safe play in all formats for me. Should be a pretty decent option this week. Wide receiver, we're looking at Michael Thomas. I mean, played Seattle's defense, and that was kind of his first down week in quite some time, but he's had double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight before that. Still very productive, still a lot to like in that Seattle game. Still, I mean, he caught all 6 of his targets for 63 yards. So, despite a tough matchup, he didn't really have any issues, catching the ball. I think in terms of a wide receiver 3 play, I don't, necessarily mind it this week. 27.5 total there. I talked about this on the Optimal podcast. Whether is it going to be a lot of the running game with Ingram and Hightower, or is it going to be through the air, or are we going to get some balanced play? I think that's kind of one of the things that we're going to be taking some shots on. And one of the kind of breaking points of Week 9 is will the Saints hit that high total? It's the second highest on the board this week, and also how they're going to do it. So Thomas, 5,800, sure, you can definitely pop him in a few lineups. Stephon Diggs, 6,500, decent projection here. I think there's room for some upside. I definitely don't mind, using him this week at all. I mean, 13 targets, touchdown last week against the Bears. Detroit, 20.3% DVOA against wide receiver ones this season. Tough individual matchup with Darius Slay. Do I think Diggs can come out on top in this one? I certainly do. I do think the floor is a little bit lower than expectations, but 6,500, I mean, I'm still going to be taking a look and taking some shots here. I do think this is going to be a low-scoring game, but I do like Diggs. I do like Rudolph. I think the matchup sets up well, and I do think they open up some room for other plays this week. So I definitely do like Diggs, and I think maybe we actually might be in the minority here if the Darius Slay news kind of that he's back scares people off of him. T.Y. Hilton practiced in full Thursday. No issues really here for me. Him and Dante Moncrief are terrific options for me this week. Obviously, great pairing partners with Andrew Luck. Green Bay ranks 25th against wide receiver 1s, 26th against wide receiver 2s. That puts Moncrief in play as well, who's really the ultimate value this week. I believe he's 6,500 or 6,400. I know he's cheap again down there. So both Hilton, both Moncrief should be getting a lot of targets this week in a game they should be trailing or trying to keep up with Rodgers, or even might be up. I mean, if I'm being optimistic, to kind of keep Rodgers from catching up even more. So I like that game. I just think with the total there, you're going to be targeting it quite a bit. Tight ends this week, Kyle Rudolph comes in as the top one. Obviously a matchup against Detroit, who's allowed 7 touchdowns to tight ends this year, 4th most FanDuel points per game. I think this is obviously a safe punt option, 5K, 500 more than the bare minimum, so I'm certainly fine with paying that price tag, and he's a solid option. Jack Doyle's a guy I'm not really looking at this week. Dwayne Allen's back practicing. Dante Moncrief back as well. I think with a full arsenal for Andrew Luck, I don't think Doyle's going to get the upside or the targets at 5,300 that you really want. So I'm definitely going to be looking to fade Doyle this week. As far as Lance Kendricks go, I mean, this one popped up here. 17 targets over the last 2 weeks. A matchup against Carolina, who have not been good against tight ends this season. 28.6% DVOA. I'm kind of curious with this one. I mean, 4,500, I mean, it's all going to matter about how others play out in this one. And I definitely don't mind it. I think it's an interesting GPP play. Swerve off of Rudolph, who, Minnesota's not a lock this week, but I do like the value. I think they'll carry a decent amount of ownership. So Kendricks would certainly be a swerve away. In terms of defense, I talked a lot about defense and these defenses on the defensive pod for FanDuel, so you can check over and get my true takes on that if you want me to really dive in. But I'm on all 3 of these. Kansas City defense, interesting swerve away from Minnesota. Theory here, both ranked to 7. Minnesota, obviously in play as well. The pricing has come up on FanDuel a little bit, but certainly in play still. And obviously the cafe value is not really budging on those 2 pay-up options. I do like San Diego this week as well. Delaney Walker just popped up on the injury report, which is a bummer because I do like him as a GPP play. But if that's the case, I mean, I like the way Hayward and Flowers have played this season. I think they're obviously, it's an easy matchup for them against Rashard Matthews, Tajay Sharp. Neither really intrigue me. DeMarco Murray's banged up. We might see some Derrick Henry in there. Joey Bosa has been phenomenal and has kind of transformed this defense through the better so far, being out there. 4,500, a nice mid price. I think there's certainly some upside here. I'll certainly be firing away with some San Diego Chargers defense shares, especially if I need to get that extra $800 in. So definitely give them a look. I think they're an intriguing value option this week. So That's going to wrap things up with the examining cafe value for FanDuel on week 9. Be sure to head on over to DaveFantasyCafe.com, check out our great tools and content.